Yamaha could potentially fill 3 spots for next year, or they could keep Remy Gardner, they could move someone up, they can do different things. It's really interesting right now to see how they're going to face those challenges. Teams don't like to change both riders, so maybe for GRT they keep one, and that would in all likelihood be Remy Gardner, and then you move Manzi up, but then they still need to replace a rider at the official team if Ray were to move.
I know that teams don't like to replace 2 riders, I get it, but at the same time, you look at Honda, you look at BMW, and maybe that's exactly what they need to do now, and just have a fresh start. For BMW, the opportunity is there to have a big-name GP rider, and then to have a Moto2 rider who can grow into WorldSBK over the next couple of seasons. For Honda, neither of their current 2 riders have shown enough to justify that they could suddenly make a step forward. So maybe there as well they need to make wholesale changes, much as they did when they ejected Alvaro Bautista and Leon Haslam previously. Perhaps those 2, and also a year where everyone's contract comes to an end in WorldSBK, lines up that it's more likely for some teams to replace 2 riders, much as they might not like to do so.
Yeah, I think it's definitely one of those situations where it's always a risk to replace both riders, but it can also be a big risk to keep 2 riders. And when you've got 3, 4, 5 years experience with someone, you know where they're at, you know what you've got with them, and sometimes it's worth making those changes. And I think especially for Honda, they need to make that change, because that project is not making the progress that it needs to make. We could hear from Jose down in the pits, they've come to this weekend with resignation that they're just not going to be competitive, and that's the factory Honda team, that's the full HRC effort. They've gone out, and it's not like it was when it was Tenkate running it as Honda Europe. This is the full factory effort, and their performances just aren't good enough, and that's where they need to remove the question marks, and one of the question marks about the riders, and then you're able to move on from it. When they went out and hired Bautista for 2020, that was a massive statement, and they haven't made that statement since.
3 minutes remaining then in free practice 2. Quick rundown of the times before our final sprint. Nicolo Bulliger leads the way with a 1 minute 26.342. Danilo Petrucci and Sam Lowes both going faster than they went earlier on today. So now the combined times have just a quarter of a second between your top 5. Bulliger, Petrucci, Alex Lowes with his time for P1 earlier on, Sam Lowes and Toprak Razgatlioglu. Next behind them is Ryan Vickers, doing a great job again in FP2. As we watch Scott Redding currently down in 15th place. Opportunity for him to improve here as he follows behind Andrea Locatelli, who is 6th fastest in FP2, ahead of Egerter, much improved, Bautista, much improved, Giannone and Alex Lowe. Scott Redding crosses the line. It's P5 in FP2, 1 minute 26.825, less than half a second from the fastest time of the day. Much more like it for Scott Redding in the closing minutes.
Yeah, I spoke to Scott yesterday, and he said that one of the big things that made him enjoy last week at Knockhill and BSB was the fact that he was at home and he felt comfortable, and he didn't have travel, he didn't have all these different factors playing a role for the weekend. He said that he wants to come here this weekend and have that same feeling. He's been able to do that so far this weekend. 5th fastest, another good sector, and sector 1 on his next lap as well. So for Redding, that shows you basically the mindset that he has right now. We know how strong he can be, we know that he's a world-class rider, but he hasn't had the results since Phillip Island to show that. Hopefully this weekend we're able to see him back on form.
Yeah, there are tracks on the calendar that he will look at as opportunities. Here, obviously, this weekend, Magny-Cours, he's generally gone well there. And yet, with his comments in the press and with how you feel the trajectory of his career is going, with the opportunity to be on a competitive bike in the British Championship as well, the fact that there's 3 clashes in the remainder of this season, you wonder which option now at this stage for Scott Redding makes the most sense, and maybe the comfort of riding in your home country is part of the equation that sways him.
Yeah, could well be, and certainly for Redding, you wouldn't be surprised if this is the last that we see of him on the Bonobo bike. If he decides that he wants to go to racing BSB for the rest of the year, he knows that's where his future lies. Whether that's for next year or a couple of years down the line, he knows that's where he's going to be. And he wants to be competitive, he wants to get paid, and he can get paid in BSB. If he were to leave, then it becomes a question mark of who do you put on that bike. And, you know, there's quite a few riders on the sidelines, and like Taz McKenzie has superbike experience that could be an option, and riders of that ilk, but it's tough to be able to decipher exactly what would happen if Scott were to leave, because for Bonovo, what's their situation like for the rest of the year if they don't have it already.
Checkered flag falls then on free practice 2 to bring this session to a close. Redding's going round for another competitive lap here. He's got Danilo Petrucci directly in front of him. Garrett Gerloff's on a good lap here as well, with only one sector remaining before he takes the checkered. He's down in 16th place at the moment, 2.5 tenths down after 3 sectors.
Gerloff's great in sector 3, has been the whole way through this session. That was actually the fastest sector 3 of all for anyone there, so moves up to the top 5. Good effort from Gerloff. Just interesting that Lowe's in 6th and then Toprak in 4th, the only riders that haven't improved their time from this morning.
Yes, and obviously they could be working on used tyres and longer runs and so on, and we don't know what tyre Garrett Gerloff's just strapped on there to set that fast time at the end, but nonetheless P5 is a headline time of 1:26.624. 3 tenths of a second down, the fastest time set by Niccolo Bullock. As Scott Redding crosses the line, it's a 1:27.181 for his final lap, so a few tenths down on his fastest, and that's about it. Nobody else looks like they're going to improve. Last rider's just coming through to take the checkered flag.